perfectly fine. And we are really excited to launch the Community Learning Series for April, Child Abuse Prevention Month, with our partners from the Prevention and Community Support section at Georgia DFACS. And this is also a really exciting day for Prevent Child Abuse Georgia. We are announcing our new executive director, Jennifer Stein, and many of you guys might already recognize her name. She is the former director of Prevent Child Abuse Habersham, the Family Resource Center. And she's also served on a lot of various state and even national committees and boards. So we're really excited to have her be joining us and launching her journey with us today. And we also are welcoming our new program coordinator, Soledad Tillman, today. She started just a few weeks ago, so she is still brand new and she'll be working with us on our helpline and training programs. So it's a really big day for many, many reasons. Without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to our main speaker today, Claire Louge, who is also the Executive Director of Prevent Child Abuse Arizona. So we know this is a very busy day for all of the chapters throughout the nation. So we're extremely grateful that she's able to spend some of it with us today. And we'll be discussing mandated supporters. So in Georgia, we have the really great Pro Solutions online training, and Prevent Child Abuse Georgia also offers in-person mandated reporting. But we know it's not just a matter of mandated reporting. To really prevent it before it happens, it means being a supportive community and being mandated supporters. So we're so happy to have her here today discussing the program that they have there and what it looks like. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Claire. Your screen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jill. Is everyone able to hear me okay? Fantastic, thank you. So congratulations to Soledad and to Jennifer. Congratulations on your new positions. Being part of the Prevent Child Abuse America Network is a real treat. And it's the best team to be on. So, so welcome and thank you for being here. And welcome to everyone. Hi, Georgia. I'm Claire Louge. Louge like the winter sport going downhill very fast. Hopefully not like this presentation. That is my one terrible joke about my last name, just to warm up my audience. I was not born to be a comedian, but it is a French last name, Louge, you know, and I am French. Both my parents are French immigrants. I grew up in New York, actually, and I moved to Arizona way long ago, 11 years ago, and 7 years ago, I joined Prevent Child Abuse Arizona because I so much admired their executive director, Becky Ruffner, who retired last year and left me a pandemic to deal with. So anyways, we've all been through it. It's been quite the year. And I'm so happy to be here to present on the concept of mandated supporters. We call it something a little bit different in Arizona because sometimes people don't resonate with the language of mandated, they feel obligated, but we think it has a nice ring to it for those of us who are already familiar with mandated reporters, mandated supporters. It rhymes, so it's a little bit catchy. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Okay. So how this is going to go today is I'm going to talk to you, with you for about a half an hour, and then I have a couple of breakout questions for you to chat about in breakout rooms. And so I'm going to also make sure that I can see the chat box, because if you have any questions during the course of my, my presentation, please ask them. I am monitoring that, so I would love to be able to have this be interactive and not just me talking at you. Okay, so I'm going to bring you back to March of 2020, which seems so long ago, but also like it just happened. And here we are in April 2021. And there was a common conversation that started to emerge in our sector, so in the sector that cares about children and families. And a lot of people were having the same concerns. And it was something like this. With lockdown happening and with all this stress happening with families, I'm worried that children are being abused more. And we can't see them. So how are we going to continue to be able to report child abuse if we can't see kids? Did a lot of you have that kind of conversation? We had it a lot here in Arizona too. In fact, I would get calls from reporters and from just different partners asking that question. And we were worried, and rightfully so, because we know on an intellectual level that when stress goes up in families, when those conditions change, when stress goes up, overwhelm is more likely to rise and to go up. And we know that when the human body is overwhelmed, when any person is overwhelmed, that's not the best for their behavior. And we don't tend to act like our best wisest selves when we're under tons of stress. And that's why there is this correlation between overwhelm and child abuse and neglect. Okay, so we knew that, and that made tons of sense. However, that question was understandable, but it was also incomplete. We started to ask ourselves a different question about a few months into the pandemic that was a little bit different. And we were asking ourselves, why are we focusing on reporting? Why are we focusing on reporting in this time of stress when really what we should be asking ourselves is, in this time of stress, is this a good opportunity to reach out and support parents so that overwhelm can be avoided? What can we do to really prevent abuse from happening in this time of stress? And not just in this time of stress, but in general. We came to realize that communities have the tool of the child abuse hotline, the child abuse reporting hotline, but they don't have other tools. Like we really drive the message of call if you suspect, call, report. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Of course, if you suspect abuse and neglect, you should absolutely call. However, you and I both know that there are some problems with that concept, in that if you suspect abuse and neglect, that is very much colored by your own bias. And we all have bias because we were all raised differently in different cultures. And perhaps our standard of how we raise a family and how we expect children to be raised is different from those around us. So as you and I both know, reporting is a time in which bias comes out. In Arizona, disproportionality that happens in our child welfare system, and that disproportionality in Arizona is for Black Americans and Native Americans. It depends on the month, but they're between 2 and 3 more times more likely to be reported to the child abuse prevention, the child abuse hotline. That disproportionality really starts at reporting. So we began to ask ourselves this question. We know how to report child abuse. People are pretty good at it. But do we know how to prevent it? Do communities have the tools to be able to actually prevent it in their everyday lives? Because communities deserve to have those tools. You can be a concerned person, and if the only tool that you have is to report a family, what does that do? What does that do? When a family is reported to the child abuse, in our state, it's called the Department of Child Safety. Sometimes it's called CPS, Child Protective Services. And if they're investigated, first of all, what does that do to a family when they're investigated? They often feel surveyed, right? Like people are watching them, people are judging them, people thought there was a problem, and so they called the authorities on them, right? And what that does is it builds this distrust, like, oh my gosh, people are judging me and watching me. And if people are judging me and watching me, I'm not going to reach out and ask for help because those people are probably also judging me and watching me. And the unfortunate part of that is that when we over-report, when we focus solely on reporting, we actually prevent prevention. Because what I mean by that is families are less inclined to ask for help when they need it at first. And when it's a kind of a smaller problem, they'll wait, the problem becomes exacerbated, and that's when abuse and neglect are actually more likely to occur. So we need to, instead of just promoting this culture of surveillance, we need to promote a culture of support where parents get the help that they say that they need as early as possible to prevent overwhelm and therefore prevent child abuse and neglect. But so how do we do that? How do we do that? How can we become not just mandatory reporters, but mandated supporters? Okay, so here's the question that we're asking ourselves in Arizona. And by the way, this question is still ongoing, and this is why we're going to break out into group sessions, because I want your thoughts on this too. So here's what we did in Arizona. So with funding from KC Family Programs, thank you KC Family Programs, I love you. If there's any reps out there, thank you so much for your leadership. We were able to hold 13 community discussions virtually last year with 13 diverse community groups. And in Arizona, there are actually 15 counties. We don't have very many counties. We're a big state, but counties are like the size of states. But so anyways, we were able to meet with 10 of our 15 counties with these 13 focused discussion groups. And these focused discussion groups were answering this question of how in our everyday lives can we create a culture of parent support around us in order to really prevent abuse from ever happening in the first place. So it really started off with this lens shift of, instead of looking for what's wrong in people and saying, okay, oh gosh, that family's yelling at their kid. Should I call? Should I not? Like really, that is the lens of reporting. And once you start looking for risks, you'll see them. You'll see them everywhere, right? Because life is stressful. It's really looking for, how can I help? And what can I do right now as myself, not just as a systemic professional, right? But literally in my everyday life with my everyday actions, how can I create a culture of parent support? Because really, we're all culture creators. By virtue of being alive right now, we create culture around us, right? We are part of this society, and so we are culture creators. So we can do this, right? Okay, so how can we create a shift from a culture of surveillance, which is not empowering, and also feels bad to be the surveyor too. It kind of creates this otherness too, like I'm going to survey to, it makes you feel judged, and no one wants to be surveyed. You don't want to be surveyed. I don't want to be surveyed. We want to be supported when we need help. How can we create a culture of support? And Rose, I totally get you. Your concern is that the culture in the US is largely focused on individualism, and that reporting might be taken poorly of a family, since some parents may not want to be told how to correctly parent their children. Totally, Rose, totally, Rose. So that is why it takes trust, right? No one wants to be told what to do. I don't want to be told what to do unless I specifically ask for that information, right? And so it takes relationship building, and that relationship building is part of this culture of support. It's not just about, walking into a family that you just met and being like, I have some parenting education information for you, and that's often how it works. Like, you are homeless. This is, I don't mean to make this, to make light of this, but you are homeless. I'm going to give you some parenting education classes. But, so we need to respond to what the families say that they need, and then through that build a relationship, and then offer them information if they wish to implement it, because we can't actually force anyone to implement it. Right? But totally, Rose, I get you. It's hard. Culture shift is hard, but we have to because this is what's best for children and families. And we can do it. Okay, so we started off these discussions with the Strengthening Families Protective Factors framework, which I'm sure many, if not all of you, are familiar with. But basically, it's an approach created by the Center for the Study of Social Policy that about working with families in a way that builds their strengths as a solution to their challenges. It's an empowering approach that builds these 5 protective factors. And it focuses on shifting our lens to looking for what's strong in families and really building that so that they use those strengths to solve their challenges. And that's literally what all of us do. When we have a challenge, we use our strengths to solve it. That's what we do. So that's what we need to do. So we gave them a presentation, these 13 discussion groups, on the protective factors as a lens to have this discussion. And then the protective factors, they outline these strategies to build parental resilience. So value and support parents, that's the strategy. But value and support parents, what does that actually look like? How do you actually value and support parents? What are everyday actions that you can do? And if you ask yourself, if you're a parent, what are some things that have been done to you that help you feel valued and supported? So those are the kinds of questions we started to ask those community groups to kind of fill in these blanks of what are the community actions that actually realize these strategies. So these are the 7 questions that we asked. I'm not going to go through all of them, but basically they're around those strategies. What can members of this community do to value and support parents? What does it look like? How have you been valued and supported? How have you expressed that value and support? What are times in which you did not feel valued and supported? Because that came out too, right? So we asked these questions in these awesome discussions. And these discussions were incredible. First of all, people know exactly how to do this. They know intuitively when we are permitted to shift our lens from looking for abuse and neglect to asking ourselves, how can I help? People know how to do this. They know what it feels like. They know what it looks like intuitively, which is really hopeful to me because I think that the first step is giving people permission to do this, that it's okay to reach out and it's okay to help. You don't just have to report. You can also support and perhaps first support and then ask yourself if reporting is actually necessary. And again, it's a little bit controversial, right? This is a little bit challenging because we don't want to discourage reporting in serious situations in which a report needs to be made. However, it is about not just having the tool of reporting. It's about giving community members a set of tools to use to really prevent abuse from happening or from continuing, which is what the reporting hotline is. Soledad, thank you for this. Family culture and language is critical as well. Totally right. Sometimes people who do not understand the other languages may misinterpret what is being expressed. You're absolutely right. The reality is that parents may be expressing something positive, but a language barrier may lead others of a certain culture to misinterpret it. Yes. So these are some of the stories that were shared during the course of these amazing discussions. And there were examples of how this had not happened to them in their lives or how this had happened. Like, for example, this story right here, this is from a mother who had gotten, who had been involved in our DCS system, in our Department of Child Safety system. And her daughter had just come back to her from foster care. And she was having a meltdown. The transition was hard for her. She was 4 years old and she was living in an apartment complex and her neighbor called the hotline on her. The cop came to the door and he asked her, what was going on. And the mother explained, my daughter just came back from foster care. The transition is hard for her and she's having a meltdown. And the cop said, I understand you're doing a good job, and left, right? First of all, great job on that cop, right, for being understanding. And then this person, which is kind of rare, but this mother went down to the neighbor because she knew what neighbor it was. And she said, listen, this is what's happening. If you're concerned in the future, could you please ask me as opposed to calling the authorities on me? Which is pretty dang brave. Not everyone would do that. But so she was sharing an example of how we jump to reporting because we may not know what else to do, right? We have this culture of individualism or kind of not building relationships with our neighbors anymore. Like, for example, I used to live in an apartment complex and next to me there was a group of college students and they would occasionally have loud parties, right? If they had loud parties at 2 o'clock in the morning, I had a couple of options, right? One, I could call the cops on them from my bed, or I can go over them and say, listen, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. There are other people in this apartment complex. Will you please freaking turn it down? And so it's that difference that one of them is surveillance and calling the authorities, right? Which many people would do. And that's kind of what we're told to do, like have someone else deal with it. Versus, can I build a relationship with these neighbors in which we can have a conversation about loud music at 2 o'clock in the morning? that takes a little bit more from me, right? But that's what community is. Okay. Gabrielle, I don't know why the child was in foster care. I don't know. But we did have a diverse group of people who joined us in these discussions, including parents who had been involved in the child welfare system, which is really eye-opening. Elsa says, how can we obtain support from the Department of Child Safety during this reporting process if the purpose is to address safety concerns and work collaboratively, not necessarily for a child removal purpose, but for additional support? So when you were in Connecticut, there was a volunteer reporting process in which parents who seek out support for the sake of their children. So that is a really big question, Elsa. And it's a really tough question because this is really about avoiding the child welfare system first. There are other things and other strategies that can and should be done to help support families rather than investigate them, even when they are reported to the hotline. Because the reality of it is most families that get reported to that hotline don't end up in removal. They end up being referred to resources. So oftentimes they are resourced anyways. And oftentimes people who don't know how to support families will call the child abuse prevention hotline to get them help. But however, what that does is that you feel surveyed and that distrust builds. So how can we create an alternate system in which families are supported? Okay, these are great questions. I'm gonna move on because I could kind of talk forever. And I wanna make sure that you have enough time in these breakout sessions to have these kinds of discussions. So it's not just me answering them because I don't know everything, clearly. Okay, so from these discussions, these rich discussions, we created a toolkit. And at the beginning of the toolkit, it talks about why. Why do we have to create this culture of support? Why are we called, especially now, with the shared experience of the pandemic and conversations about racial justice really coming to the surface and staying there, which is wonderful because that is something that needs to be addressed by all of us. These kinds of shared experiences are coming to the surface, and people are understanding now more than ever that there needs to be this culture shift, that we cannot keep on going the way that we have been doing this. We cannot simply intervene in child abuse to solve the problem of child abuse. That's really managing the problem. It's not getting ahead of it. How do we get ahead of it? In a way that has an eye to racial justice, that makes sure that we are addressing that disproportionality, and that makes sure that parent and youth voice is included, and really get families the support that they say that they need as opposed to what we say that they need. Because we know that that's gonna prevent abuse from happening, which is an expensive problem, both financially and morally. I mean, I don't have to explain that to you, that child abuse is terrible, right? We want to prevent this, but right now we're focusing on intervention. So this toolkit talks about why, that really community is the answer, and community is the entity that really prevents abuse through those connections, through that resilience, through that knowledge. And it's the what that, we must call communities to shift their lens to one in which they ask themselves how to support families rather than just how to report families. And then how? So we compiled those discussions into a toolkit of 26 messages. And those are the 26 messages that came out of these discussions. And by the way, this picture right here of a kid in a grocery store, interestingly, in the vast majority of discussions, an example that used to come up is, imagine that you're in a grocery store. Like my kid was in a grocery store and she had a tantrum. And then this couple was really judgmental and told me, like, can't you get control of your kid? And I felt terrible. And then like another person would say, gosh, that happened to me. And there was an older couple that came up to me and said, oh my gosh, I remember when my child was that age. That's a hard age, you're doing so good. And how different that felt. And so those everyday interactions with a common experience of a kid is having a tantrum in a grocery store, right? We've all been there, we've all seen that, or we've all personally experienced that with our own kid. how can we as community members react? Because it's the way that we respond to that really simple situation that creates a culture of support or a culture of judgment. And you can pick, right? You can pick. It's really, really small. Just giving them a smile and an understanding look, that's really powerful, right? Okay, those little things. Okay, so now I'm gonna go through the 26 messages that we came up with. I know 26 is a lot. I'm gonna read them all to you. And as you're listening to them, I'd like you to re-listen, because I'd like you to tell me which ones are resonating the most with you, which ones really speak to you. Because, well, first of all, we haven't tested these messages yet. We haven't even launched the toolkit because it's still in the approval process for KC Family Program, which are very meticulous about what they approve, which they should be. I'm going to share those messages, and then we're going to release you to breakout rooms to talk about which messages resonated with you, and also how you might be able to create a culture of support in Georgia. So big questions, but those are the breakout session questions, just to prep you. Okay, the first message, offer help proactively and specifically. What's cool about this is that as opposed to saying things like, call me if you need anything, or hi, I'm your neighbor, if you need anything, just let me know, is that's very, very broad. And oftentimes, because in this culture of independence where you're supposed to do everything yourself, right? That is the mainstream cultural norm. You're not gonna reach out and ask for help. It's hard to ask for help. But when your neighbor says, I have extra toilet paper in case you can't find any at the grocery store because people have bought it out because of this pandemic, let me know if you need some. Then you are more inclined to say, hey, actually, can I borrow a roll? Because we are out and there's nothing at Target, you know? So proactive, specific help, first of all, creates boundaries around your help, that what you're allowed, what you are saying that you can give, and also helps parents and families reach out to you for specific things, okay? So offer help proactively and specifically. Check your bias, really important. Ask yourself, is this my standard? Or is it, could this be a cultural difference? Am I setting my perhaps white middle class standards on someone else and expecting them to meet that? Could there be another way to look at this? So checking your bias, really important. Mayra, we intend to have these messages in Spanish, absolutely. They are not translated right now. If in case anyone wants to help us, we would love that, but that is a really good point. So we don't have them yet. And by the way, we'll be sharing them on Facebook every day for the course of April as our April messaging campaign. So check out Prevent Child Abuse Arizona, and if you want to share these messages every day, do that. We would love that. Okay. Next messages. Listen more, talk less. So much revolved around active listening, as opposed to guessing what someone needs or guessing who someone is. Listening more and talking less. That you can really change someone's life just by hearing their story, just by witnessing them and doing literally nothing else. That creates a culture of support. Know your neighbors. So introduce yourself. I mean, all these messages are really simple, but knowing your neighbors before something happens is the most protective way to actually help when something happens. And by the way, for you too, you know, if you need something, this is about reciprocity. It's not about you being the agent of help. It's about creating community, which is reciprocal. And that's really important too. Model behavior. So model good parenting, whatever good parenting means to you in public. You never know who is watching and learning. Never know, right? So being a model. Spreading the word. So using social media or whatever methods of communication to share information that connects and uplifts caregivers. So it's Child Abuse Prevention Month, as you know, and oftentimes our regional child abuse prevention councils will focus on having communities report abuse during this month. What if you're a parent who is struggling, who sees those social media messages of like, if you suspect abuse, report it, here are the signs. That is not something that is supportive to families. I mean, it is, again, reporting is important, but when we exclusively focus on reporting, we are creating a culture of surveillance. And so when we share messages that are empowering, uplifting, and supportive, that changes our culture to help families feel like, okay, we're feeling seen, stress is normalized, and we can reach out and ask for help. Explore all options. So this is giving people permission to think about other things other than reporting, okay? Explore all options. When you have a concern, ask yourself if you can resource it rather than report it. So as opposed to, if you hear yelling next door, do you call the authorities, or can you do something else? Can you engage that person in conversation? Use your own judgment. It's giving you permission to do that. Keep your word. So following through on what you say that you're going to do. Be realistic about what you can provide. So again, that goes back to being proactive and specific, but keep your word, follow through. One of the things that you can do is letting them know that they won't be alone, that you're there to listen and that they're not alone. That can be really powerful. Even when you don't know what to do, you don't know how it's going to turn out, because we really don't know how things are going to turn out. And we can't promise that it's going to be okay sometimes because we don't know. Accept help yourself. This is very powerful. So asking for help from the families around you, even if it's like for a cup of sugar, something really, really simple, what that does is it creates a reciprocal relationship. And by accepting help, especially if you're a leader type, accepting help, that demonstrates that it is okay to ask for help and to accept help. And that changes this really insidious, hyper-independent culture in which we're not supposed to seek and ask for help. Normalizing help-seeking behavior is one of the most powerful things that we can do to get families the support that they need to prevent abuse. So accepting help yourself, especially when you're a powerful leader type, super important. Some of the things that, for example, right now, going to therapy, going to having a mental health counselor is more normalized than it was 20 or 30 years ago, right? People talk about, I talked to my therapist, especially in millennial culture and younger, it's just become more acceptable to go to a therapist. And I love that, right? Because what that does is when you're like, oh yeah, I was talking to my therapist the other day and she said, da, da, da. What that does is it demonstrates it's okay to go to therapy, right? And it's normal. And you're accepting help. And what that does, it makes it okay for someone else to do that too. So that is the culture shift that we're looking for to make it normal. Sharing is caring. So sharing information about reliable, accessible resources and normalizing the existence and the need for resources. Again, if you are a leader type, which you are all because you're here, doing things like, for example, in Arizona, there's a birth to 5 helpline. If you have a child under the age of 5, call that helpline if you need something so you can say later, I called the helpline and they were very helpful on this. And again, that normalizes that everyone can use these resources. It's not just the parents that are being surveyed. So again, normalizing these things. Building safe spaces. So this concept is about making it okay for specific groups who have experienced marginalization, historical trauma, or any kind of trauma in which trust has been broken, that they deserve to have safe spaces for them to be able to share their experiences free of the eye of others that they may fear are surveying them. So that it's okay to build these circles of trust for those who have been, who have had that trust broken. Okay, that may be a really good strategy. Thank you, Akita. Value diversity. So affirm the beauty of culture, embrace what is different than you. A strong culture helps build identity and belongingness. So culture is an asset, cultural belongingness is an enormous resilience building asset for families and for children. Embracing that, embracing that. Be a search engine. So one of the things that you could do is offer help in this way. You know what? I'm really good at researching things. If you need any help finding anything specific, I'm really good at like finding things. Like if you need help finding good childcare, like offering to be the search engine, because sometimes finding help, finding what you need can be overwhelming depending on the systems that are in place. We don't have a very good connected system yet in Arizona. We're working on building that, but it can be really difficult to navigate the help offering systems already and seeing if you're eligible or yeah, so it's just, we need to make it easier. See their strengths. Okay, so whatever they say to you, affirming the strength that you see and that you hear. So even if they're going to, you know, they're like, for example, I had a friend at the beginning of the pandemic who said, gosh, I feel like such a terrible mom. I gave my 3-year-old a package of gummy bears for lunch because I was on a Zoom call. I did not have time to give her lunch. I just feel like a terrible mom. I'm like, listen, first of all, she's not going to die from having a package of gummy bears for lunch. I'm sure she was thrilled. It's not something that you're going to do every day. And you are juggling the impossible here. You are working full time and caring for your child. You need to give yourself a break. You know, and the fact that you care, that you know that gummy bears aren't a really good wholesome lunch means that you care about nutrition and you get it. All right, you're doing the best that you can. That's seeing your strength as opposed to being like, yeah, gummy bears are really bad for her. Like, do you know that they could rot her teeth? Yeah, she knows that. That's why she's bringing the story to you. So it's really about seeing the strength as opposed to kind of like, yeah, that's, you know, it's seeing strengths. And at the very least, thanking them for the courage that it took to share this with you and honoring that. Okay. Educate rather than denigrate. Shame is not a good learning tool. Shame is not a good learning tool. That's a great message. So start education efforts where parents are, giving them a little bit of information at a time rather than kind of shaming them into learning. Again, it's not the best learning tool. Don't take it personally. Okay. So if you offer support or if you're trying to be helpful and you are rejected, it is not about you. It's not about you. I know that it's hard, but it's not about you. You know, human beings, when they're stressed, are not on their best behavior. And if someone rejects your help seeking, it's likely because they've experienced trauma or stress around being offered help. Distrust. We've all had trust broken at some point, some more than others. So it is not about you. Don't take it personally if you are rejected. It's heroic to try. Be a calming presence. So your calm creates the environment of calm for other people. So freaking out is not going to help others calm down. Being a calming presence, just in your body language, in your tone, that can help people regulate themselves. Really simple, right? Be a parent ally. Consider yourself someone who is an ally to parents, who stands up for them. You know, if someone is judgy to you, changing that conversation and saying like, it really seems like they're doing their best, like parenting is really hard. Being that ally when you stand up for families in general can change the language of our culture. Story time for grown-ups. This is about when you share information and you don't want to kind of like tell people what to do, you can put it in third person. Like, well, I had a friend who accessed the Birth of 5 helpline, and it was super cool because they sat down with her and they gave her all the time she needed to really explain the situation. And then they gave her some pretty powerful, so basically putting a story in the third person and offering help in that way that presents it as an option without telling them what to do. Watching your language. Again, this is about talking about people who receive help or, talking about people who receive help. Watch your language around how you describe people who accept and receive help. Treasure children. I don't have to tell you this one, but when you're in the presence of a child, be kind. When you're not in the presence of a child, also be kind. You know, strike up a positive conversation with a child, acknowledge them, make eye contact with them and wave. Those kinds of things, again, it creates a culture of support. We don't have to ignore children or families. I know that we have a culture of privacy, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't reach out safely and be kind and create this community culture. Right? Little things. Convene, show up. Sometimes showing up to something is the best thing that you can do, because you never know who might need your strengths. You never know. Convening people and showing up, hosting. Saying the magic words. I want to help you. What can I do to help you? Again, this talks about running interference if someone's being judgmental about a family, saying it looks like she's trying her best. Normalize stress, for goodness sake. Can we just all agree that parenting is stressful? Let's just agree, right? It's normal. So, and the job of a parent is to be able to nurture a child. And it's really difficult to do that when you're overwhelmed. That's human biology. It's just biology, right? So when we understand that overwhelm is not good for people, and when we help people de-stress, it's good for them. There we go. You know, that's basically, yeah, parenting is stressful. When we help parents not have that stress, they're better parents. Voila, that's like that's the whole strategy. Okay. Honor bravery. So again, if someone asks for help or if they've sought assistance, encourage them that they did the right thing. Really, really affirm that behavior. Tell them you're not the first one and you're not the last one who's going to need help. This is really stressful, right? And that's one of the things that's been really beautiful about this pandemic. There's been a lot of tragedy. I don't mean to frame it in this way, but there's been a sense of togetherness that we're all going through something that's really difficult. And so people can empathize. Be the village. Start connecting with people. You know, make a deliberate effort. Leave a note with your number on your neighbor's door. Say, hey, I haven't really introduced myself yet, but I'm Claire, and this is what I do for work. And if ever there's an emergency, you just let me know. Like, you want me to walk your dog? Like, you just be the village. Bring back that village. Okay. So we have 15 minutes left to your lunch hour. So what I'm going to do is have you break out into sessions for 10 minutes. Is that cool, Jill? And I would like you to discuss these two questions after seeing these messages. One, what message or messages really stood out to you? Like, which ones were you like, yes, this one, right? And what could you do in your everyday life or in your work or in general to create this
hornet can resolve human flesh.
And then we'll share, and then I'll let you go. Okay?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to put those questions again in the chat box now so that everyone can see them going into breakout rooms. And so when you go into the breakout rooms, remember to unmute, unvideo yourself, be respectful of others, sharing what we have in Georgia. And I'll give you guys a couple of heads up minute warning where we're going to join back together for discussion. And when we do that, I would love for some of you guys to share what you have discussed in the chat box. Just go ahead and start doing that because we won't have that much more time. So we'll see you guys soon. And remember, just step up, put those cameras on if you can, mics on. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, I would love to know either by sharing in the chat box what your themes were, or if you'd like to unmute and share what stood out to you.
Hey everyone, so I was in a really incredible group and really great conversation, and we talked about how people have to just show themselves grace and acknowledge we are all human. And one of the last comments we ended on was just like, you know, yeah, it's good to show support because you never know when somebody is going to open their heart and say, yeah, actually I do need help, or actually I would like to talk about that, or whatever. So I thought we just talked about like the human side of things, and that was really powerful.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And it's true. People, again, like people know how to do this intuitively because we're all human beings. But we need to permit ourselves to be that human being, which is pretty amazing. And just going down that track of like, huh. And starting off with giving yourself grace, that might be a message we need to include too, because there's not very much about like, take care of yourself, keep yourself okay.
We were lucky enough to have a male in our group. And one of the things he shared, I think is very important, is that men are taught not to cry, not to show emotion. And also men are known or have or been given the bad rap that they don't communicate. So he said sitting down and talking to some of his friends sometime was great. It absolutely helped him. One of the other things that everybody signed on to was being specific about helping people. And the last thing was not to be judgmental. That was the last comment that was made coming out of our group, not to be judgmental. And I think with some others that were really great ideas that they may want to chime in themselves and share.
Thank you.
We also have a lot of great ones in the chat box.
I do.
And how people can just be a better resource in there. Connection between creating safe space and valuing diversity. Celebrate bravery. Like asking for help is, helping ourselves and others. There's a lot in there. Thank you guys so much for sharing on that.
Thank you. And what I love about committing to be a mandated supporter or declaring yourself a mandatory supporter is that you can start small and where you are. And that's how culture shift happens. And you can commit to this, and this is a practice. Sometimes you will not want to, say hi to someone in the grocery store because you're feeling like crap and you want to go in there for your soda and you want to leave. And that's okay. You need to give yourself that grace too. But can you practice more often to be more neighborly, to take actions like this? That's where it starts, and that's where the shift happens. Yes, thank you. Well, I have loved this. Thank you for sharing part of your April 1st with me. Happy Child Abuse Prevention Month. Every month is Child Abuse Prevention Month. It's been an honor to be here. Thank you for your ideas and for being who you are and to create and for being part of the movement to create this culture of support, because this is where we're going, and this is what we need to do for the good of us all. All right, I'm going to pass it back to Jill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. I'm going to share my screen just with the last couple announcements. So the webinar will be on our website tomorrow. If you go under trainings, it will be there. I'll put the link in the chat box before I go. So the slides will be there. The recording will be there. I'll have a couple other links of interest as well. And just to let you guys know, at Prevent Child Abuse Georgia, we run the 1-800-CHILDREN helpline, which is exactly that. It's providing concrete resources to families in need. And it's actually connected to the DFACS hotline here. So a lot of people are calling, just don't know who else to turn to. They're concerned, they need resources. They know someone who needs resources. That's exactly what the 1-800-CHILDREN helpline is designed to do. So we even have posters on our website saying, of course, report suspected child abuse, but when is a time where we can just connect families with resources and connect them with the 1-800-CHILDREN helpline? And it's also an online resource, so you can search by location, service, things like that. As a professional, help them navigate that. And we have a couple other promotional ones that just make it help-seeking behaviors. How do we normalize this? Just like everything else on our fridge, all those lists, asking for help should be one of them, especially in times of need. So we have a lot of different, we have some gifts and some images like this. Our partners at DPACS in the Prevention Community Support section were great enough to fund some of this help-seeking research last year. And so we have some good social media posts for you guys to put out there as well.